Thank you everybody for joining our live Q&A webinar today. It's part of the free virtual helpline that we set up a couple of weeks ago in response to the situation we're all facing with coronavirus. The idea of the virtual helpline is to do exactly that, provide a service for anybody in communications, marketing, engagement or creative roles, or people who are running their own businesses who do all of that type of work for themselves. It's completely free and we're offering it so that people can submit questions to us online, and then once a week we roll it up into a live Q&A. I'm pleased this week to have some special guests on the line with us who are joining as panellists. We're going to focus the conversation this week around internal communications and communications strategies during this time. The focus will be more so on the way we do communicate with our employee base, but also the intersection of where that meets with our client communications as well. So on the line with us, we have got Lisa McNally, who is the Director of Communications for a global software and services company called CSG. Now, if I have this correct, I think CSG has about 4,000 people worldwide.
Yep. That's correct.
Great, with offices around the world. So Lisa does a lot of work developing strategies and implementing communications programs for people in countries everywhere around the world, and for clients who are located around the world. So probably quite used to doing things like Zoom conference calls, but perhaps not in this sort of situation, and with a company that not everyone's always used to working this way. And also, Lisa, I think you're quite active with the IABC, the International Association of Business Communicators, and a previous chair of the IABC in Asia Pacific. So we're very lucky to have you on the line with us. We've also got Zoe Pashley. Zoe is an Agile HR specialist and the director of Jackson Talent Management. Zoe works with several businesses, typically medium-sized businesses in the professional services and technology sector. So again, businesses that are very much people-based organisations. The people are the service deliverers and very important component of the business. And I know you've been doing a lot in the last few weeks, Zoe, with engaging with those organisations and advising them and helping them to, figure out the best strategies for moving people out of offices and working from home, and how to communicate during these times. And I think you're going to give us some fun examples of things you've been doing in this time as well. And we've also got Rachel Patterson on the line. Rachel is with OTM. She is an internal communications specialist, and similar to Lisa and Zoe, has worked with both very large organisations and smaller organisations, focusing on internal communications and change-related communications. Rachel's currently working with a very large government client of ours, so but is doing that remotely, working from home, and has also worked with some other smaller organisations. So we'll bring some good perspectives to the conversation today. So thank you for joining us, ladies, and giving up your time for this webinar today. It might be nice to just kick off, if one of you wouldn't mind, perhaps just giving us a taste of what the last few weeks have been like for you in your roles, and maybe what changes you're seeing with the people or the companies you're working with.
I'm happy to kick off. As Amy said, we've got around 4,000 employees around the world in 26 offices. There's a number of people who are very used to working from home or working remotely, but this has been quite a dramatic change because there's also a huge volume of our workforce who rely on being in the office. So we've had to very quickly, because we decided on a Sunday night US time that offices would be shut from Monday. So some employees were already at work, and we had to very quickly move everybody to be working in a home environment. We had been fortunate to have done a little bit of testing, but it did mean moving support teams and cancelling visits to customers and all sorts of things. So it's been a fast move, and we've really had to sort of put things in place quite quickly to connect with that workforce. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the call, but that's where we're at.
I can imagine it's been a busy time.
Yeah.
Yeah. You go, Zoe.
Yeah, probably similar to Lisa, just kind of mobilising the workforce to work from home. Whilst a lot of the businesses which I work with have, we did have work from home policies in place, not everyone had actually kind of, ensured that they'd signed them, ensured that they'd read them, ensured they understood what everything meant. So again, just kind of preparing, doing a lot of preparation for that as well. So yeah, sort of
Yeah, we've had a similar sort of a thing. There's been little provision in the past for working from home, so it's all fairly new for us, but everyone's getting new devices, and one of the biggest challenges is keeping everybody not overwhelmed, because there's so many and so much rapid change in the messages that are coming from the government, and how we pass those messages along. But yes, the challenges sound very similar.
Yeah, it was actually interesting being in the office just as it unfolded, because those people who was, as the company started to kind of people started to work from home, I know I got a lot of questions saying, oh, you know, when are we going to work from home, and a lot of that. So kind of managing the right time to kind of to mobilize the people to work from home while kind of keeping everyone calm was interesting, an interesting challenge actually.
Yeah, and from a global perspective, it's tricky as well, because I've had requests from employees to provide access to a platform that outlines which countries and cities are in shutdown at any particular point in time, so that they can have a better appreciation of what's accessible for those employees. So if they send them out to get like an iPad, for example, so that they can work more closely with a customer on a project, are they going to be able to A, leave their house to get it, B, have somebody deliver it to them if they can't leave their house, and C, is it considered an essential service and therefore able to be delivered to them? So obviously C is no.
Yeah, and so that adds another layer, I'm imagining, for you, Lisa, because it's not just about being aware of what's going on where you are yourself, but all the different countries that your organisation, is operating in.
Yeah.
It's sort of a segue into one of my first questions that I've got, and I'll pose this one to you, Lisa. It's about how do you work out and how do you know what you want to say and when you want to say it, and who should say it. So that's probably a very colloquial way of asking, you know, how did you develop the plan of attack for your communication strategy, particularly when you had to mobilise so quickly?
Yeah, look, there are a few sort of key principles that we followed, and I'll just bring up a screen now that's got some PowerPoints on it that you can see. So this is taken from Reagan Communications, the best practice that we followed, which is a sort of internal communications expert company globally. So firstly, you know, we very much took the approach of communicating early and communicating often. So we announced our office closures. I mean, obviously in the lead up to COVID-19 happening, we were communicating regularly, but from the office closure perspective, we had a video of our CEO that we released with the message. So it was a very much heartfelt message. And I think that that's what we're all seeing, whether it be messages to customers or messages to employees at this point in time. This is a much more honest and heartfelt way of communicating with employees and customers than you ever see before. And I've got a couple of examples I'll show you later as well of the sorts of things that we're seeing other companies doing. But there's a lot of vulnerability around the messages as well, because obviously, you know, when we're talking to employees, this is no longer just about our organisation or about our employees. This is about, you know, people who are mothers and fathers, people who are sons and daughters, people who have children. You know, we've got to think about our employees as being more than just somebody who's working for our organisation, and our customers as well. When we send a message to them, it could be that they've just found out, you know, news that somebody has contracted COVID-19 or is very unwell or has even passed away. So, or just a nervousness around the virus, not to mention a partner who's lost a job, or a parent who is isolated and you can't get to them. So the communication takes on a very different slant when you think of it from that perspective. So communicating early and often is very important, but also acknowledging, you know, some of those sensitivities. Also, communicating across multiple channels is key, because, you know, you need to make sure that you're able to reach your audience, and there could be any manner of things happening that's preventing them from using the normal email platform, for example. So can you reach them, you know, via a social media platform or another tool? I think also at that point of defining the communication, it's about thinking about the general behaviours and mindsets that you want to communicate, so that it's not, so that you have those in hand, which really, I guess, you know, takes it to what is one of the next steps that we followed, and that's really reinforcing your values. So at CSG, our values are to be a good person, be inventive, be customer obsessed, and be authentic. And we've tried to make sure that when we're communicating with our employees, but also our customers, that we adopt some of those principles. So inject these values, you know, your values into the way you're communicating with your staff and your employees. It, you know, brings that, and we're seeing that, you know, from airlines, from hotels, even from politicians, we're seeing that reinforcing of values of theirs is really coming through. The next one that we followed was to establish a single source of truth. So having a platform that's available that people can go to find information. I guess we're seeing that with organisations as well, that they're putting, COVID-19 messages front and centre on their websites. But for us, we use a social media platform called Social Chorus, and that's where we're putting all of our messages onto one channel, so that at any point in time, an employee can go there and access everything that's been said about COVID-19 as it relates to us and our customers. I'll just pause there in case anybody else wanted to say anything about those three, because there's a couple more to go.
Well, actually, I was going to ask, with that establishment of a single source of truth, what platforms are you using to do that, or how are you actually doing that?
So for us, we're using Social Chorus. So we have a platform that's already established. We launched that probably about 18 months ago to move away from always using email for communication. It's accessible from people's mobile phone, it's accessible from their desktop, and we have a whole range of different messages that we can put on there, from video from the CEO to articles, and we've actually had a lot of employees using it. We've got a hashtag set up, Remote CSG Life, where people can post photos of themselves working from home. There's been an extraordinary number of photos of dogs posted to the Social Chorus platform, which we call the Buzz. So I've been trend jacking that and directing people with a cute dog photo to look at other business type messages as well. So I'm trying to sort of keep it a little bit of BAU, because we obviously, for us, we're still incredibly busy, which is the case for a lot of organisations. We've got a lot of work that needs to get done, so which we're very, very fortunate to have, but we want to keep that focus on the compassion, the change for everybody, but also the focus on, our customers and what we're there to deliver for them.
And you mentioned there about kind of communication being heartfelt and authentic from the leaders, and I think that's how we all want our leaders to communicate. And it's interesting because just yesterday I had a managing director come to me wanting to deliver a message which he'd written over by email, and I kind of looked over it, and it was not his usual style. It was actually a lot more formal. It was overly complicated, and I kind of went back and said, well, why have you put it that way? And I said, look, if you change your communication style from your usual communication style, which is authentic, people will panic more. So, if possible, try and keep your communication style as normal as possible during these times, as normal as it can be, because if you do start changing it, people will notice.
Yes, the other thing that we've been doing is there was a number of different spokespeople, and now there's been a task force determined where there's a key spokesperson and a key team that are then responsible for communicating these messages, rather than having this spread of messages coming from all sorts of people. Obviously, line managers are still responsible and important in keeping their own people happy, but from the higher up management, it's been good to have that task force determined.
Yeah, and that ties to that next sort of principle that we put there in terms of determining an executive voice, which really comes from a committee. So we have a committee as well of people that really represent right across the business, so that they can bring in what is known, and then as a group they can define what should be shared. But having a single executive voice, I think, is really important at a time like this. And as much as I say a single executive voice, we have two. So it's actually, our CEO does do messages which are more that heartfelt message, the reassurance of the strength of the company, but also the pure compassion to the employees to say, you be where you need to be right now, and if you have any concerns about anything, please be in touch with us, and we're here to help you. And then we also have our head of HR, our chief HR officer, who keeps it real, talks about the concepts of working from home and making sure you're exercising and looking after yourself, and just more about the people element of the everyday functioning as a business. So but I think having those executive voices that are taking the messages from the committee and sending it out is really valuable.
Did you have any more points that you wanted to go through there?
Yeah, sure. And there's the next one, I guess, goes back to what Rachel was really saying about involving the people managers. So really equipping them with those key messages. So whilst you've got that single executive voice, you give the toolkits to the leaders to be able to reinforce those messages. And also, leaders are struggling as well, because, their employees are working from home. They don't have that connection that they are used to having with their staff. So how do they sort of maintain operations when people aren't face-to-face the way they normally are? And finally, it's really about showing you care. And we're seeing that, from a marketing perspective externally, as well as, within companies from an internal comms perspective. So that's a lot of what we're putting into our people messages as well, is you might have a team meeting and you bring everybody together, but what happens after a team meeting in the workplace? You might wander to the kitchen and you run into someone and you have a chat to them. And I actually had a call today with our head of the global delivery organization. He said, my people aren't having dinner together anymore. They're normally traveling the world. They're sitting at breakfast together. They're sitting at dinner together. And he said, that's when stuff gets sorted out. They have a meeting, but it's really about having that opportunity to sit down at dinner and just really talk through things. So as an organization, we're trying to encourage people to have a coffee break with a colleague. So get onto a video conference call with them and just talk with no particular agenda, but just the option to talk through it. And that's the same with customers. So, we're in a similar situation with our customers as well, and looking at innovative ways to connect with them.
Yeah. And I'll make a note to come back to that point about customers. Just coming back a little bit to the equipping leaders, Zoe and I were actually having a conversation yesterday in preparing for this webinar, and I think it was a really interesting point you raised, Zoe, about how do you have difficult conversations digitally, and how do you combat potential for misinterpreted information when you're not, you don't have, I talk a lot with my hands, and video is great for expression on video calls, but you're not always on a video call, or you might be doing a lot of emailing or chat windows with people. What do you do when you don't have those social cues and body language and even just having those difficult conversations digitally?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely kind of one of the things is to ensure that you are having those conversations, you are on the correct medium. So, if at all possible, if it's going to be a difficult conversation, try to have it via video. Or at the very least phone versus email if it is going to be a difficult conversation. And also, some of those basic principles, of course, do still apply to having difficult conversations. So try and take the emotion out of it, on the phone, or, if they are on the phone, you can still pick up tone. You can tell when someone's frustrated, you can tell when they're really angry, so certainly kind of just be aware that the tone will still be coming across over the phone and over the video. Of course, if you're going to have a difficult conversation and it is over video or phone, make sure that the environment's free from distraction, that there's not going to be someone, you haven't got something in the background which is going to catch their eye, or someone's going to walk past, and of course prepare for the conversation as well. As with any difficult conversation, ensure that you know what you're going to say, that you're going to be specific, and you've got the clarity there, and don't not have them. I think the difficult conversations are difficult to have at the best of times. So, but now more than ever, we need to remain productive. So therefore, if you need to have a difficult conversation, if you need to provide feedback to someone, they need to hear it so that they can improve, so they can do something about it. So yeah, definitely don't avoid having those conversations. And of course, much like everything, you may fear having them, and look, once you've had it, that weight often lifts. It might not go as well as you thought, but you learn and you'll know what to do better next time, or it may have gone better than you expected. But certainly let's keep talking, even if they are, they do have to be difficult conversations.
Yeah, great. I think that's a really important thing to remember. And we're all going to have to adapt, because this is not just a 1 or 2 week thing. This is, we're likely to be affected for several months. So you can't really go into a standstill for that length of time. Businesses have to keep moving, and there will be potentially more difficult conversations or different conversations than you might typically have when it's business as usual.
Yeah, and we will have to educate our leaders as well. Literally just 5 minutes ago, before this conference, I got an email of feedback which one of the managing directors sent for which behaviour he'd like to see rectified. And when I read the email, I was like, that would have been so much better to have delivered over the video. And so we will have to do a lot of education with our leaders. With regards to kind of when and how to have those difficult conversations. Yeah,
that's a really good point too, because I think it was said a bit earlier in the conversation that we're all a little bit new at this. So our leaders have not necessarily been faced with a situation like this before either, and they're having to change the way they work and they communicate. So yeah, a lot of things to look at there. Lisa, I probably cut you off from showing the rest of your slide pack. Did you have some examples you wanted to share with us?
I do. Let me just go back to that. So I'd sort of spoken about the fact that we are all communicating in quite a different way, and I just looked out, and I'm sure that everybody has some good examples that they've received. I know there was a couple of weeks there where I was getting emails from all sorts of companies I didn't even realize I'd subscribed to talk about the situation and how they were dealing with it. But, you know, one that I pulled up was Marriott. And I think the thing that was really interesting about this is that, you know, it was so much from the heart that it started with our hearts and thoughts go out to people. But it was that other thing that they've got this focus on monitoring. So it was all about the safety. But of greatest interest with a lot of this communication is it's almost yelling out, this is not a sales message. So they say, we know travel may not be your first thought. So they're sort of saying, please don't think that we're telling you it's okay to come and stay with us, or, you know, but what we're saying is that you can trust us. So I think that there's a lot of that messaging there, that it's about building relationships now. You might not be in an opportunity to market to or to sell to them. So how do you create that balance? And we're looking at how we reach our customers at this point in time from our, you know, our marketing team. And rather than having a focus on product, and you need to be very careful at this point in time because you might have things scheduled to go. So how can you make sure that what you're sending out isn't contradicting other messages you're sending? But we've changed our focus from being very product driven marketing and messaging through social media and through LinkedIn and that sort of thing to being about the people. So we're about to launch a campaign that's looking at our people at home. So photos of people working from home, photos of people connecting with customers using whiteboarding tools, photos of people out, you know, doing exercise during the day to show that this is how our company's responding, and to really reinforce those values that make us the company that we are. So be a good person, that sort of thing. So it's changing that focus. And there's been some cool advertising that's come out as a result of that around Ford and, you know, a few other big companies that have done that. I mean, the other big one that's impossible to ignore is, of course, Jacinda Ardern. I mean, she's just an absolute legend, right? And I must have at some stage started following her on Facebook, and it popped up as a Facebook Live the other night, and she was literally in her tracksuit and apologised and said it's messy business putting a toddler to bed. But it was their first night of lockdown in New Zealand. It's hard not to get teary when you sort of talk about it. But she, you know, she basically said, look, I'm here. I know this is a tough time for all of you. Tell me what your questions are. And the feed was just all of these wonderful positive messages to her, which obviously wasn't what she was looking for. She was looking for genuine, let me answer your questions, but she just encouraged everybody to stay at home. And I just thought that sort of reach out really again reinforces that, you know, heartfelt, honest approach to marketing and internal communications that's happening now, and the vulnerability that everybody's feeling.
Yeah, great example, great example. I wonder, it'll be interesting to see which organisations are able, because that's a signature style of Jacinda Ardern, and there'll be probably a lot of leaders and brands and organisations who that's not their normal way of being, and that might make them a bit uncomfortable to show that vulnerability or show, you know, what we call that authenticity. I guess in those situations, though, it's about striking a balance between what Zoe was saying earlier, which is be mindful not to defer too far away from the way you normally communicate, because that could unsettle some people. On the other hand, if there's any time to be authentic and to be a little bit vulnerable, now is probably that time, while still showing strength of leadership, strength, like clarity of message, you know, not confusing people, but being personable. Thanks so much for that, Lisa. That was some really good information, and I think a really nice set of points and a format that people may be able to take away when they're thinking about their own communications planning. I'd like to actually turn to you for a few minutes, Rachel. I know that the environment you're working within, and without giving away anything sensitive, you're dealing with a big organisation again, but in a very different sort of situation. It's government. Your communications is to our citizens. That's what the organisation you're working for is focused on. And so the people in that organisation are all about delivering service to our citizens, and very much on the front line and heavily affected by what's going on. Would you consider this to be crisis communications planning, and how have you approached that?
Yes, I would consider it to be crisis. We're right on the front line dealing with people, and we're not going to stop, but we are having to change our approach. So I have actually been unable to work for a week because I've been offline, but the communications planning, we're using forums like Yammer, getting our intranet site as a central location for information, as I said, creating the task force for coronavirus federally. So all those sorts of things are ongoing. We have standard guidelines for messaging, so we make sure that we're communicating with concern for our employees and the people we're serving in the community, and making sure that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, how they can find more information, how regularly we're going to be communicating with them, how people can get help So where they go for information, and basically connecting what we are doing with our purpose. So why our values and our purpose have been important to remind people what we're doing when everyone's stressed and under pressure, bringing it back to linking actions to values and purpose have been key.
Okay. So what do you think, you rattled off quite a few things there that are really important parts of communications planning and crisis communications planning. If you had to pick, say, the top 3 or 5 things to think about when you're developing a crisis comms plan, what would you say the most important things?
Sure. Yeah, so as we talked about,
to 3 or 5.
Certainly what we talked about before, which is choosing a team, choosing a spokesperson, somebody who's communicating. You may need to get advice from legal, from HR, from IT is important at the moment. The support services have been critical to getting everybody. It's been amazing to see how fast the support services have pivoted to be able to deliver work from home for people who haven't previously been able to work from home at all. Once you've determined that, it's then channels. So how you communicate. We communicate through social media, so internal social media like Yammer. Our intranet side has been vital. It is very interesting to note how to communicate with people who don't have access online. So it may be text messaging or things like that. So, and making sure that you have all your staff contact details and all their private emails and their private mobiles and things like that. Because, you know, when you need to contact people and they can't get onto their computers, their work computers, that's been vital to be able to communicate with them that way. And then how regularly you communicate. So, making sure that the messages coming from the top are coming regularly, but not overwhelmingly regularly. You don't want to be too many messages. And the line managers as well, briefing the line managers, giving them checklists, helping them to work out what they need to communicate with people who are actually coming to them in person and talking to them or calling them on the phone as their first point of contact within the organisation. So, and letting everybody know about support services. So, like an important employee support line, a lot of organisations have an employee counselling line, which is confidential, letting people know about that sort of resource and any changes to policies. So, you know, obviously one that nobody's doing at the moment is travel, but there's a whole lot of changes to working from home policies and, you know, leave policies and what kind of leave you have to take depending on what your situation is. So those are all sorts of things that we have been thinking about. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long list. It's a lot of stuff to talk about, isn't it? That when you're doing business as usual, they're probably not things that are front of mind, even for communications and HR people, but they really should be. They should be things that if you've got good governance in place, you're able to fairly quickly mobilise a crisis comms strategy. Let's have a little bit of fun. I'm mindful that we've been talking for about half an hour, and whilst we do have a full hour booked for these webinars, we actually do try and keep the conversation to about half an hour because we understand that everybody is quite busy. What are some of the fun things that people have been able to do in their communications with their teams or even with their customers? There's a lot of there's a lot of concerning messages out there in the media. I'm sure people are feeling a lot of anxiety and facing different emotions than they would normally face. I know myself, I've, gone through quite a roller coaster just throughout the week, and I think everyone's probably feeling it at different times. How do we inject a little bit of fun into the workplace and still keeping it authentic and keeping us focused on our jobs? What are some of the things you've all been doing?
Well, actually at 4:30 I have a virtual happy hour, and this week's theme I think is Spanish or sangria, so I'll be getting my sombrero out, so we all kind of get, because at that particular time would normally be like Friday drinks, so we're just virtually having Friday drinks. So that's definitely been kind of one fun way. And I know Lisa mentioned that with their company they've got a lot of photos of people working from home and their pets. I'm also encouraging that with all of my clients as well. We have channels of people kind of showing photos of them working from home and things like that. So that's some of the things which we're doing.
Well, that sounds like fun. We should have hosted this webinar after your happy hour. So there's some great examples, and I've been seeing some examples from other forums and groups that I'm a part of really fun things like that people are doing, and even socially, I'm seeing my friendship groups looking at ways to stay connected and using tools like WhatsApp and social media. And in some ways, I feel we're almost more connected with our colleagues or our friends, because we're having a lot more online conversations and a lot more chats and things like that. So that's in some ways been quite a positive, I guess, outcome from what is not a very positive situation that we're all in. Any other examples from anyone?
I've heard of a fancy dress team meetings. So everyone come in your most outrageous shirt. So, you know, those sorts of things that, you know, keep people interested.
Excellent. That's going to be on our list for OTM next week, Rachel, just saying.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
We've had we've been doing, we've got this afternoon, we tried to kick off a round the world social. We don't think it's going to work this Friday, but we're hoping that we have so much fun in Asia Pacific, and we post the photos to our social media internal channel, that everybody will join in next week, and we'll have just a constant happy hour that goes for all of Friday, wherever it is Friday around the world. But we already know in advance it's a failure. We know it's not going to kick off, but it will start and it will be fun. And, you know, we're going to have different groups doing different things. So in Malaysia, they've been very structured, and they start off with drinks, and then they do exercise, and then they've got a dance party happening. So
wow,
it's all happening. And I think the other thing, Amy, you know, you were saying about people maybe being more connected than ever, I think that is actually just so key, because I know I work from home all the time and I don't have an issue with it, but when we called offices shut, I just felt this sense of isolation, just knowing that my colleagues weren't in their normal workspaces. So I think it's great. You know, our customers are in the same boat, and we had an incredibly busy close to the year with sales. So now we're trying to kick projects off. So we're looking at ways that we can connect with customers globally and run projects as though we were face to face with them.
Yeah, that's an interesting time, but forcing a lot of innovation, I'm guessing, and a lot of change to the ways of working.
Yeah, I do love how all of the tools, you know, we have the tools in place now. Imagine if this was, you know, 10, 20 years ago, it would be in such a different situation. But what with, you know, Teams, you know, all of the different kind of platforms we have, even not work, you were talking about kind of some of the personal things which people are doing. This Saturday night, where you're able to kind of connect Netflix so that everyone can all watch the same program at the same time. It seems, which I didn't realize you could do, but I think definitely having a tinker around with all of the tools which you have. There's so many functionalities out there where you can share and collaborate with the tools that you have.
Well, that's actually probably a great segue, Zoe, into our little wrap up for this week's Q&A session, and that is any tips, hot tips from our panelists, or Nia, who's also co-hosting with me on the line. If you've got any suggestions for our viewers on simple digital tools that they might be able to bring into their organisations to help with communications.
Well, I don't have a tool, but I have a PSA, which is, you know, in Zoom, you can set up push to talk. So you can press your space button, speak, and then release, and it's mute the rest of the time, which is nice.
Wow. So you don't have to hear all the...
No, you don't have to hear everybody's dogs and children.
Push to talk in Zoom. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you.
Look, I would just say any free platforms that are out there, if you're not already set up with Microsoft Teams or a platform that your company is using globally, then I would, say get onto Zoom, because I believe there's free versions of that that are available. We've also, as I said, we're kicking off workshops, so we're using a whiteboarding tool. There's a lot of free applications out there. Even Post-it, apparently, Post-it Note Company have a Post-it app that you can use. So we use Post-its a lot for our project implementations, and people at the moment are using them and then taking photos of it, but we're looking at a tool that we can use like that. So it's always the case, isn't it? If you want an app, there's an app out there, and if there's not, then now's the perfect time to create it.
Thanks, Lisa. Any other tips from you, Zoe?
Yeah, look, I'm using Microsoft Teams a lot, but there are, a number of different free apps out there. So, and one thing I would say, if the internet does get really, really dire, I know that kind of Facebook and Messenger, I know not from a business perspective, not everyone's connected on that, but WhatsApp and Messenger are the best when the internet is really slow. Those connections still work. So if you can't connect to anyone, try them on WhatsApp and Messenger, because that's going to get through more likely than text, phone, Teams, and things like that.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. That's some really good tips. And what we'll do is the recording of this webinar will be available as an evergreen webinar via Zoom, and we'll also post some links up on our website and social media channels. I've been making notes furiously as everybody's been talking here. So many great tips and insights that we'll make available in the compilation of frequently asked questions, which is going on to our website. And we will start to share questions as posts in our social media channels as well, so that people can start interacting interacting with those. If anybody does want to submit a question to us, it's very easy to do. If you know any of the OTM people directly, please just send us a question via email or give us a call. If you're not familiar with us, then there is a landing page on our website with a form in which you can submit a question. If you don't want to fill in a form, you can send us an email at helpline@theotmcompany.com. Or jump onto any one of our social media channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, and drop us a message. So whichever is your communication method of choice, and we'll be happy to connect with you directly as well as anonymously share answers to your question in the Compile group. Thank you very much to all of our panelists for giving up your time for this today. We really appreciate it and hope that this was a helpful session to everybody who joined with us online.